pratiboditam bhagavata narayanena swayam vyasena gratitam purana munina madhye mahabharatam advaidamritavarshinim bhagavatim ashtadashaadhyayinim ambatvamanusantatami Bhagavad Gita bhavadveshinim namostute vyasa vishala buddhe pullaravindayatavatra netra yena tvaya bharata taila purna prajvalito jnanamaya pradipa prapanna parijataya totra vetraikapane Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopalanandana Partho Vatsya Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Good evening. Where were you guys last week when I came for class? Yeah. Actually, it's the other way around. Where was I for the past few months? And we had one class after I got back from Japan, and in whenever that was, and we covered a few verses just before what we're covering today. So we have to refresh our memories before we continue with the content of chapter, what? 3. Yes, right, exactly. Now we have to remember what chapter we're in. There's 5 sections in chapter 2, and each time we have a gap, I have to cover that again, just in brief, so we can remember where we are. The first 7 verses of chapter 3 are like an introduction, basically. Often, the beginning of the chapters are a kind of an introduction to the subject matter. And then from the 8th to the first half of the 20th verse, Lord Krishna gives us some basic details of the science of Karma Yoga. This is the chapter about Karma Yoga. So he better talk about it, right? He does. Then from the second half of the 20th verse until the 29th verse, before that he gave details of Karma Yoga, then he gives the details of what is called Ajnani. Ajnani means a knower of the truth, a knower of the self, a knower of God. In other words, a God-realized being or a self-realized being. That's what we call a Jnani. Jnani and then Ajnani. So if Jnani means a knower of the truth, what is an Ajnani?
The rest of us.
Yeah, the rest of us, right. Means someone who's ignorant of who they truly are. So we're going to plunge into that section next week. We can learn about what a Jnani is, which means we're learning who Amma is. Not just our skewed version of Amma, but what Krishna says Amma is. So it'd be interesting to hear what one incarnation has to say about another incarnation, right? Then, from verse 30 to 35, which we'll get to sometime in the middle of next month, he comes back to the Karma Yoga teaching and he gives a summary of it and its significance. Then he concludes with verse 36 to 43 with a question and answer session. Arjuna asks questions which actually sometimes sound foolish, but often we can really kind of visualize ourselves asking the same question. That could be us asking that question to Amma very easily. And so we really like to hear the answers that Krishna gives to the questions that Arjuna asks. He talks about an obstacle to Karma Yoga, and Krishna gives the answer. So it's very helpful. That'll come at the end of next month sometime. So we had covered up to verse 14. And I'm going to rewrite something on the board, because when we did this, whenever that was, a lot of you weren't there and it was too long ago anyhow. So we're going to revisit that. I wrote a cycle. I drew a cycle on the whiteboard to show how a process works. So I have to space it properly so I can look at this. Okay. So I'm not a good artist, please forgive me. I don't know if I can even draw a proper circle. No, I can't. That blasted at the left corner. Right? It was doing pretty well for some time there. There we go. Okay. So we have here, like all beings. He talked about how all beings, and he says, all beings are sustained by food. And then he says all beings do actions. I just dug my own grave by drawing this so big, but we'll figure that out. And then from the actions, and then the food comes from what? Anybody remember where food comes from according to the previous class?
Sacrifice.
No. Food comes from? What do you need to have food grow? Rain, that was it. You need rain. Right? So, now we have a circle which is almost complete, except we need to figure out how we get from action to rain. What is it about actions that brings about the rain? Oh, David doesn't know the answer. Yeah, there we go. That's where it's supposed to go. And what is sacrifice called? Or in this context, what was the word that he used? Yajna. What's the common meaning of yajna that we hear in Indian spirituality? Typically, what do we think of when we hear the word yajna? Fire ceremony. Amma said we can have a yajna-shala. So that means a place where you have yajnas, where you have fire ceremonies. But actually, this whole ashram is a big yajna-shala. Why? Because it's a place where you make sacrifices. People come here. You could have people move from 4,000 square foot houses to small flats, small apartments. Come here, it's a sacrifice. Actually, it's a bonus, but it feels like a sacrifice initially. So, in this first verse of today, Krishna is going to elaborate on what he taught last time. And let's figure out what that is. We're going to read verse 15. I'll read it and you can repeat after me. Karma brahmodbhavam vidhi brahmakshara samudbhavam tasmat sarvagatam brahma nityam yajne pratishtitam. So I'm going to have some unusual guests read the meaning in English.
It says, it's translated as, know that action is born from the Veda, that which springs from the Supreme Consciousness. Therefore, the all-pervading Brahman is ever established in the Yajna.
Thank you. So, what we can do is, I was supposed to write two things above action. Now, you get to see how I'm going to do that. I need that. Oh, where'd it go? She took it. Okay. So, in other words, this whole chakra, because he calls it a wheel later on in this chapter, and a wheel in Sanskrit is a chakra. So you have above actions. Actions come from Brahman, he says, which is sometimes interpreted as Veda. And Brahman comes from, Brahman doesn't come from anywhere, but if you take that meaning as Veda, then where does Veda come from? Veda comes from the Supreme Consciousness. So that's what this verse is showing. Supreme Consciousness, okay. Supreme Consciousness is what has given us the Vedas, which are sort of what we would call Shabda Brahman. That's why you can call it Brahman, because it is the expression of the Supreme Truth in words. So that we call Shabda Brahman. Brahman in the form of sound. That's why we worship the Vedas, the scriptures, because it is, even though it's just a book or it's just words, it's a manifestation of the Supreme Truth. So how can we say that actions are born of the Vedas? That doesn't really make sense, does it? No? It doesn't mean all actions, right? It means that actions, we have a big gap there, but actions become yajna. But it's the Veda, or it doesn't mean just India scriptures, it can mean any scripture that is based in supreme truth. Could be anywhere in the world. Doesn't have to be written. It could be an oral tradition. But those teachings instruct us how to convert our actions into yajna. How to convert our actions into an offering. You know, just because you know how to do action doesn't mean that all your actions are going to become an offering. Doesn't mean that all of your actions, or even any of them maybe, are going to become a path towards spiritual growth. We all have done so many activities and we're still not God realized. At least maybe if you're hiding it, then we don't know. But if you're not hiding it, then we're all equally still aspiring for God realization, even though we've done so many things. So just activity alone is not an assurance of spiritual growth. It is converting those actions into a path of spiritual evolution or yajna. And for that wisdom, we turn to the Vedas, or we turn to the words of the great beings. You know, when I said it's not just India, there's another story that comes to mind, that also the same teaching is there in Gilgamesh. Anybody know the story of Gilgamesh? Supposedly one of the most ancient epic poems. I can't remember, I think it's Mesopotamia or something. Huh? Sumer Republic, just a little while ago. Only about 5,000 years ago. And it's said that there is Gilgamesh is the hero, and he aspires to be immortal. And then he travels to the ends of the earth to try and figure out how to become immortal. And finally he learns from somebody, I can't remember the whole story, he learns that the way to become immortal is what? It's to make a sacrifice. So it's the same thing. Tyage neike amritattvamanushuhu. When Amma enters the hall, that's what we chant every time. It means not by wealth, not by progeny, not by any of these things, only by not by action either, only by sacrifice does one become immortal. So that the importance of sacrifice, or doesn't mean sacrifice in the sense of begrudging, oh, I gotta do this like that. It means making your life into an offering. That is how we can attain immortality, not physical but spiritual. So in that sense, the Vedas are the origin of action because they teach us proper action. So this story, this cycle showing how selfless offering brings rain. I think I mentioned last time that I have seen many times, and maybe you have too, seen how Amma's presence brings about the rain. Where rain is badly needed, Amma herself has said, without referring to herself, she said that the presence of one dharmic being or one person of great self-sacrifice can bring about the rain. And just the other month, when we were in San Ramon, I went there, everybody was complaining, oh, there's no rain. Who was there when in San Ramon that time? And then I was supposed to give a talk one, I think it was the beginning of the retreat. The whole day it rained like anything. And it was like Amma's about to make a big sacrifice again. She's already been there sacrificing for a week, and then the whole weekend she the retreat is even more sacrifice. So it rained constantly all day long. So I've also seen it in more extreme cases, like in Australia. Often when we go to Australia, anybody followed these things? Australia's had terrible droughts for the past 10, 20 years. And when we go, not recently, the past couple of years it's abated, but until about 2 years ago it was really bad. And each time we would go there, people would start off on the tour, oh, the drought this, the drought that. By the end of the tour, there's so much rain has come after Amma got there that they were saying, oh wow, the drought is abating now. I've seen it happen. And I just checked, not to overdo this point, but it is very true, just to show you how even experience shows. When Amma came in 2006, they were having a drought. After she got there in April, the rain came. They had a severe drought up again 2 years later. See, every 2 years they have this drought, and every 2 years Amma comes. I just checked it. And right around the time Amma comes, the rain would come. So anyhow.
Swamiji?
Yes?
There was 1 year I don't recall, I was traveling. There was terrible drought in the country. Every city I landed in, it started raining and pouring.
Right.
Every city. I remember in Santa Fe, it started hailing. We had to stop the car. Even in San Ramon and in Carmel, it would rain.
Yeah, places where it's not supposed to rain, exactly. So anyhow, doesn't mean that if I'm gonna go somewhere, there can't be a drought there, but it just shows that what Krishna is talking about can be witnessed even on a material level. So, the another important thing to remember is this Veda, or the spiritual teachings that we are tapping into through not just the Indian tradition, but any really well-preserved tradition, is tapping into a supreme consciousness. This is not just the words of one master. It's not just like a book that Amma wrote. Amma's never written any books, you know that, right? Other people write down her words. And the rishis from the Vedic times are said to have done what? Anybody know what it is said of the rishis? Both male and female. How do we attribute the Vedas to these rishis, these great sages?
Verbal transmission.
Verbal transmission. Of what? Of what? What are they transmitting to us? Truth. And then, is this just like, I gotta write this down, this is a good idea. Is it like that or what? Well, how are they getting that truth? Where do they get that truth from? Huh? They saw it. See, this is the important point. In the Vedic tradition, we call the rishis mantra drishtas. We don't call them mantra kartas. What is a karta, for those of you who know Indian languages? We don't have too many people who know Indian languages here today. What's a karta? Somebody who does something. What's a drishta? Somebody who sees something. So if they were authored by the rishis, we would have called them mantra kartas, the ones who wrote the mantras, but we call them mantra drishtas. So that means that those mantras are attributed to them because he or she was the one who saw the mantra in their samadhi state of meditation. So just like, you may have a thought that comes to you in a crystal clear moment, a really beautiful thought. It's not coming really from you, it's coming from somewhere beyond. Now imagine if that crystal clear state was samadhi. Then what comes to you from beyond is maybe a Vedic mantra. So that is what they're transmitting to us over thousands of years, right? So it's not a creation of the human intellect. This is the important point. They're not like philosophers. Never mistake the rishis for philosophers. So what is the problem of having something? If the Vedas were a product of the human intellect, what would be the problem with that? What's wrong with that? I mean, there's a place for philosophy, but we're saying, what separates that from philosophy, the product of human intellect? How is it any better? Intellect is finite, right? The intellect is, if we read the Tattva Bodha, it's a product of the 5 elements even, just on the subtle level. So how can something which is a product of the 5 elements understand the origin of the universe, the intellect? That's why, I'm not qualified to really make a categorical statement, but from that logic, we can assume that people who dedicate their whole lives to trying to ascertain the origin of the universe using only the intellect are wasting their time. Because the intellect's part of the creation, right? How is it ever going to be able to grasp its own source? Amma would say you have to transcend the intellect to understand the origin of this universe. So the Vedas are not something the truth that's conveyed through the Vedas is not something that can be either established or disproved by the intellect. They're beyond. They're coming from a place beyond. So science may change from day to day, and if we depend on that changing source of quote-unquote truth, we'll really be miserable. Anybody who's had experience with, allopathic medicine over a few decades would know that at one point, maybe when you were young, one medicine was touted as a wonder drug. Now they're like, no, don't use that. That's not good. Use this, And then after some time, that'll be also disqualified. So Amma was also saying at one point, we don't know the side effects of all these things. We won't know for decades to come. So, but the spiritual truths that we're talking about don't have side effects. They've been tried and tested for thousands of years. So we can trust them. Now, the question is, how did the rishis tune into this? Because this is the one opportunity for talking about the Vedas. That's why I have to sort of drill deeply here. Because that word comes up quite often, Veda, 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 right? Now we understand that they are not written, they are perceived in the heart space. But how did the rishis, what enabled them to access that? Yes?
If you go deep into the heart space, into the feeling of the heart space, and that becomes everything, then that's something that's a non-linear experience. It's beyond the intellect, it's beyond this world. And so if you go into that, then they must be shown something not of it.
Right, which also explains why your average person, most of us, we find it very hard to go beyond our intellect. If someone says, go beyond your intellect, no. It's not, you can't just do it at the drop of a hat. So they because they had, through tremendous sadhana and austerity, transcended the limitations of the intellect, they themselves became a transmitting medium for that, or receiving medium for that truth. Amma says that, that it's all pervasive actually. Even in this atmosphere around us, those vibrations of truth are there. And Amma is tuned into it. That's why she gets these sudden answers that we don't get, right? So that means that if your antakarana, or your inner organs, not the physical organs, but the inner organ of the mind and the intellect and the subtle body, are purified and tuned properly, you can receive that truth that's all pervasive. So that's, Amma has compared it with the difference between a TV and like a light bulb. Let's say you put a TV here and you turn it on, I don't know if they still use TV waves or if everything's digital now. They still have TV signals? Because in Japan it's like all digital, I don't know how it works here. But anyhow, if you have that TV, it can receive the waves and you'll see the image on the screen. If you put a light bulb sitting in the same place, it can't do it. It doesn't have that transmitting or the receiving medium inside of it. So the TV's been specially prepared to receive, but what about us? If we sit in meditation, are we going to? Maybe we will. But one devotee was saying to me, I wish I could receive the teachings or the Vedas in my meditation, but now what happens to me is I either get a headache or I fall asleep. This is all that comes to me in my meditation. I don't get this Vedic teachings. So we have to prepare the mind more specially. Not just for Vedic teachings, but also to get Amma's teachings. Some people say they want to feel Amma's presence in their daily lives more. When I need to know what to do, is it A or B? What's the right answer? I want Amma to tell me. It's just the same thing. Amma's teaching is the same as the Vedas. It's not like Amma has some separate message to offer us. It's the same eternal message. That's why they call it Sanatana Dharma, the eternal path. So Amma's presence also we can perceive if our antakarana, or our inner organs, are tuned properly. So it's very similar to what the rishis were doing. And that's another reason why Amma tells us to do all these sadhanas. She doesn't do it just because, she gets something out of it, or it's her preference. It's to help us tune into her as well when we're away from her. It also helps us to better understand Amma's teachings. Let's say Amma does say something to us already, and then at this point our mind is maybe not made subtle enough to grasp the deeper significance of what she's saying. But like the rishis tune themselves to the Vedic teachings, or that what's in the atmosphere, if we tune the mind more, we'll be able to grasp the deeper ramifications of her teaching. Like Amma has said, the mind is a lie. What does that mean? The mind is a lie. How can you say the mind is a lie? Why is the mind a lie? Just think of it's just one thing that she said. I experience it all day long. How can we say it's not real? It's not eternal, but I experience it all my whole life. How is it not eternal? And in my next life I'm going to have a mind also, if I'm unlucky.
Because we can change it.
Still, if it's there constantly, how is it a lie? I experience it all the time.
It's of the 5 sheets and the 5 elements.
Okay, it's all, philosophically it's true. It's a false identity. So there's different ways of looking at it intellectually, and it's true, all the things you're saying are true. We can say it's the flow of thoughts, it has no substance of its own, it's just one thought, and it has no inherent existence of its own, right? It's like a mirage. But intellectually these things make sense. At the same time, we're still slaves of our mind, are we not? The mind says, go do this. We're like, oh yes, okay, I'll do it right now. So in order to understand really understand what she says and have that change our life, that is another story, right? So we can't say that we've really grasped the essence of what she's saying until it has changed us. So that additional level of understanding is what we can get when we tune ourselves into her more. And that, because we don't have that tuning, that's why we trust in the teachings of the sages, the ancient sages. And it can, not just Amma, but also Amma, there's certain things that Amma doesn't teach us. She doesn't repeat all the Upanishads and all the Bhagavad Gita. She says it's already there. You read it yourself and study it. So those teachings we have to trust as well, because Amma can't repeat everything that every sage ever said. So we need to trust, and that's where faith comes in with these scriptural teachings. We really have to trust in the wisdom of the ancient sages. So, understanding our relationship with this world, properly understanding our relationship with this world, is one of the key teachings of Karma Yoga. Because we often lose sight of how our actions affect ourselves. We don't understand that what I'm doing and my attitude when I'm doing that action is directly affecting me too. It's not just affecting the world around me. So one example that Amma gave before was, and recently she had to give a message for the climate change conference. You all saw that? Did you see that? She was invited by the president of France, and she wanted to go, but sorry, I have to hug my children in Toronto. I can't go see the president of France. There's more important things to do. My darling children in Toronto. But the problem was the president invited her long after she had decided to go to Toronto. So that's why. But she provided a message, and on another occasion she said that we don't understand how our actions are in a very tangible way leading to these problems like global warming, climate change, and drought and things like that. Like, for example, if someone says to you, you're driving your car too much and that's causing a drought in Australia. You'd be like, what are you talking about? How is that? There's no connection. I've never been to Australia, But that's because we don't understand our relationship with the world properly. We don't understand the impact that we're having on the world around us and how that's coming back to us also in another way. So just like that is a reality, the same reality takes place in a karmic sense. We haven't properly understood the effect that our actions are having on ourselves karmically and spiritually. So that proper understanding is another way of thinking of karma yoga. Amma has said that someday science will prove all of the things that these scriptures have talked about. And the only reason why science is not able to do it now is because science is not refined enough. I don't think she told it to the scientists maybe, but she said that at one point. Science needs to become more refined and advance more in order to verify all these statements of the scriptures. But why should we wait for that day to come? We just follow these teachings and have faith in their words. So this verse 15 is partly intended to bolster our faith in the scriptures, and also the fact that this whole universe is established in yajna, established in sacrifice. There's no escaping it. Yajna, he said before, is a fundamental law of the whole universe. So if we think we're going to escape sacrifice or making an offering of our life, we're only deluding ourselves. We could do it maybe temporarily, but not for long. Let's read verse 16 together. Evam pravartitam chakram nanuvartayati hayaha nanuvartayati hayaha aghayur indriyaramo mogham partha sajivati. Okay, good idea.
He who in this life does not follow the wheel, thus set revolving, whose life is sinful, whose contentment lies in the senses, he lives in vain, O Partha.
Okay, so last verse was a praise in one way or another of a karma yogi. This verse is discouragement from being the opposite, basically. This is how not only Krishna but many of the saints have conveyed their teaching. This is how you do it. This is how you don't do it. This is how you do it. So Amma often tells jokes in her satsang, It's hard to make a joke out of doing something the right way. Usually she makes a joke of doing it the wrong way. So there was that joke about the man not communicating properly to his wife. Did you hear about that? That one about the cat? Who doesn't know the joke? Who does not know the joke about the cat? Okay, I'll just say it really quick. So she said, communication is very important in all aspects of life. You have to communicate your word, your message in a way that takes into account the other person's feelings. So this woman went off for a trip to Europe and her husband sent her a message, a quick email says, your cat fell off the roof and died. And she quickly flew home. She was like so attached to this cat. And then she said, why did you just send me such a blunt email? You could have divided it up into several messages. You could have said like, oh, your cat climbed up on the roof. And then the next day you could have said the cat slipped. The next day you could have said, actually the cat hurt itself when it fell off the roof. So I took it to the hospital. And the next day you can say the cat didn't make it. So that way you can break it to me slowly and it won't hurt me so much. He says, okay. And then she had a quick funeral for the cat and went back to Europe. A few days later he sent her another email saying, dear honey, your mother climbed up on the roof this morning. Right, so like usually they give examples of how not to do things because it's easier to, instead of saying you are a bad person, you can say this is how you don't do things. So it's easier for us to accept that kind of a teaching, right? Krishna really never criticizes Arjuna as a human being. He criticizes, how he's being kind of whimpering and being a baby in the first chapter, but he doesn't say anything really negative about him. So this is how they convey teachings without hurting our feelings. So here he's criticizing the third person, selfish person. It's not you, it's somebody else, right? So it's easier to accept. And a couple points that are important here and that we have to really sort through so we don't get confused. Evam pravartitam chakram. So the wheel thus set revolving. What is it? What do we mean? Thus set revolving how? What do you mean? Because he didn't say how revolving, did he? Or did he? Sacrifice, right? The chakram, right? The circle, this wheel set revolving. Thus means you can say sacrifice, or I like to use that word sacred offering. It's a sacred offering because that somehow makes you understand that it's going for a higher purpose, right? And it's not begrudgingly done. It's done with love. So that concept of sacred offering is essential. It's part of the wheel of creation, and it's an inherent law. So if you don't follow that wheel, your life is aghayur, sinful. When we say sinful, what do we mean by that? I think we talked about this before. What do we mean by sin? in this context or the Vedantic context. Yes?
That which takes you further from the truth?
That which takes you further from the truth. That's what takes you away from yourself or God. That's especially Amma's definition of sin. So it's not like you sinned against God. It means every time we do something quote-unquote sinful, it means we're just creating more suffering for ourselves, taking ourselves away from the truth. And why do we say that he lives in vain? Why would you say such a person lives in vain?
Not achieving.
Sorry?
Not achieving anything. He's
Okay,
not accomplishing.
very good point, but why does offering, why do we call that achieving? Yeah?
He has to go on again and again.
Okay, that's one way of putting it. Yeah.
We've been given this human body to
Ah.
be on this path, and if we don't follow that, we're wasting life.
We're the only ones that have full free will. I mean, animals have some degree of free will, we might say, but they don't have that discrimination, the power of discernment like human beings have, where they can actually judge between right and wrong and make a decision to offer themselves for the sake of a total stranger or for the sake of a higher principle or whatever. Like the sacrifice that Amma makes for tens of millions of people, you're just not going to see like a chimpanzee do that or a, mouse do that kind of a thing. It's only human beings that do that. So that level of exalted existence is only possible in this world that we know of for human beings. And if you don't use this human birth for that, for even something reminiscent of that, what's the purpose in having a human body? That's basically what we learned when we studied this verse. And Amma has said, that example that she gives? Even such and so lives, eats, procreates. What's the example she gives? Worms living in excreta. She loves these graphic examples. Imagine that a lizard pees in the ice cream. Okay, then, it's like, wow, that's just like, it brings this, you never even thought of a lizard peeing before in your life. And then in ice cream, I definitely don't want to eat that, These are these graphic images. So she's got these fecal worms, in her example. And then she's saying, what's the difference between us and fecal worms? Because they also have children and wives and houses. And, if you try to shovel it up, they're like, don't steal my house and my beautiful wife, Amma said that. She says if you overturn a rock and there's a worm there, and he's with his other worm wife and worm children, he's like, oh God, this guy's here to steal my beautiful Miss America wife and my brilliant children, get back from my family, and you're like, I don't like worms, right? So we're all flattering ourselves. So human birth has to be better than something better, in some way, than worms and animals. So she says, if we're better, we have to prove it. We have to use this life for something uniquely humane. Otherwise, you don't need a human body. And if you live your life with full disregard for the value of a human body, what is the message that we're giving God? What's the message we're conveying to God then? Or to the universe?
Lack of gratitude.
Yeah, I don't need this human body. I don't want it. So next life, okay, you don't want it? Fine, you can have some other body. It can be a pig or a bird or something like that. Okay, so according to this concept, the value of a karma yogi's life is determined by how much he was able to give, right? This is what Amma says. The value of our life is determined by how much we're able to give, not by how much we're able to take. And by that definition, that even if a karma yogi dies a complete pauper, he could be he could have lived an exalted life, and he could be immensely rich in the spiritual sense. Anybody remember the story that Ramakrishnananda Swami told somewhere on tour about the Vastu analysis of Amritapuri Ashram long time ago? Devidas nodding his head. Anybody else? Where did he tell that story?
Toronto.
Toronto, yeah, because it's fresh in my memory. Anybody else heard that? You remember, what's the story? Can you remember?
The money going out the gate.
Yeah. So there was a Vastu practitioner. You know what Vastu is? Vastu is the Indian Feng Shui. At least as old as Feng Shui, if not older. But anyhow, a guy came and they showed him around the ashram and he analyzed it based on Vastu principles. It's like a sacred geometric science, you could say, architectural science. And he said, the main gate for the ashram should definitely not be in this location. If it's here, then all the money in the ashram is going to flow right out the gate. And then he told Ramakrishna Swami this, and he's like, oh my God, this is a terrible problem. So he goes to Amma and he tells him, Amma, we have this big problem. This guy, he knows everything about us, and he's saying that if we don't move the gate, all the money is going to flow out the door. And then Amma called the guy, and she said, call him, and he thought, okay, now Amma's going to follow his instructions. And she said, my son, I just want you to know that I like having the gate there. She says, because for you, losing money is a bad thing. Giving away money is a bad thing. But for me, it's a wonderful thing. It's the best thing that we can do is have money flow out of this place to other people. So she said, keep the gate where it is. And to this day, money's been flowing out non-stop. So that's why everybody still lives there in relative poverty. It's not the only reason why. Amma likes poverty. So for monastic people, at least. So if we live only following our desires, and the word he uses, Indriya Ramaha. So what is Indriya Ramaha? It means one who revels in their senses, right? Indriya Ramaha. So one who revels in their senses means they perceive all their enjoyment to be in the world. And the only way to interact with the world is through what? The senses. You can't directly interact with the world. You have to use the five senses. So through the five senses, we revel in the world, and that's why we are said to be revelers in the senses. So, but such people, and us, when we live like that, basically, we are wasting our life. Even animals, Amma says, are useful during life and after death, like a cow. Cow gives milk. In the end, it gives its skin, horns, all these things. They're useful for something. But humans are not useful during life or after life. After death, you have to burn the body and throw it away. So, the real potential we have is in at least dharma, if not moksha. So the only meaning in our life comes when we focus, make effort there. That's why Amma's life is such an eloquent demonstration of that. Anything that's uniquely human, she has perfected it and demonstrated it so beautifully for all of us. And the other side, if you're not a reveler in the senses, what are you? I think that comes in the next verse. I don't want to spoil it. Yes, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to do that next verse. So the question is, he's saying that if you don't do selfless actions, you're getting sin. But what about certain quote-unquote saints, or certain people who are really recognized saints, like Ramana Maharishi, and then Dakshinamurti? You may have read, he just sat in one place under a tree. He didn't do anything. Ramana Maharishi just sat there like this, giving darshan. He didn't do anything. So are they incurring sin? Why not? We'll find out in the next verse. Next week. No, just kidding. Today. Yastuatma ratireva syad atma triptascha manavaha Atmanyeva Cha Santushtaha. See, it says S, but that's actually, when you say it, when you cut it there, it becomes Cha Santushtaha. Tasya karyam na vidyate. Okay, anybody who has not read here before? Mary, is that it? Yeah, let's have you read. You can wait for the mic.
But the man whose delight is in the self alone, who is content in the self, who rejoices only in the self, for him there is no action that he needs to do.
Beautiful. So this is a very wonderful verse, and actually it's often quoted as well. Don't use this as a justification for being lazy. There's no action that I need to do. I'm just going to sit here and watch TV. But this is about the relationship of a knower of the self or a knower of truth and karma yoga. What is their relationship with this whole concept? If we were to look at Amma as, remember that award she got from Hinduism today, the Karma Yogi Award? Actually, it was not really applicable to her, but they gave it anyhow. She doesn't have to do karma yoga, but so what is her relationship with karma yoga? How do we put those two together? So we have to remember, go back to what we talked about earlier, that karma yoga is not an end in and of itself, right? It's a means to an end. Are we supposed to do karma yoga forever? Are we supposed to do it forever? Well, it's, because you may do it for another reason, but not because you need to do it forever, right? It gives what? You all remember, I'm sure. What does karma yoga give? Purification of the mind, the antakarana shuddhiya, the inner organs. So, but if you're like Amma or Ramana Maharishi or some realized being and you're already 100% pure, you don't need to do it. We'll talk about why they, in a little while we'll talk about why they still did it, but at least not him, but Amma does. So, it is not the ultimate because it doesn't give moksha directly. That's why we say, na karmana na prajaya, when Amma enters the hall, because there's no way to get moksha just by actions. But at the same time, it's not useless either, right? It has its place. It's extremely important, especially for all of us right now, because number one, we're completely immersed in actions already. We think about doing things all day long, right? And we define our being and our relaxation time as well with reference to doing. Either I have to do something or I want to relax, I'm going to stop doing things, right? We can't relax and do things at the same time, unlike Amma. So this doing is such a core part of our being right now. That's why we need to learn how to convert actions into spiritual growth. And also because it gives us an inner purification, and we need purification more than anything else right now. That's why karma yoga is really important to us at this phase. And but the key thing to remember is that we should neither be too lazy to do karma yoga, and also we should not be too hyperactive to stop doing it when the time comes. Now the time, meaning there's a time every day to stop doing karma yoga, and there's a time in the long span of our life also where karma yoga will slowly transform into something else. What's an example of the time during the day when you stop doing karma yoga? Huh? What did you say?
When Amma stops hugging people?
When you're doing your sadhana.
When you're doing your sadhana, okay? When you come for Gita class, right? Let's say you were doing something just before Gita class, And you're like, oh my God, I gotta finish this. Oh, I gotta finish this, so I'm not gonna go for Gita class tonight. Something like that. That's an example of how the mind becomes so hyperactive that it doesn't know when to stop working. That is the opposite extreme. We're not so lazy, fortunately. I think most of us have gotten out of that laziness where we don't even want to do karma yoga at all. We've got a certain amount of purity that we have that inspiration to do it. Typically, we get caught up in that vicious cycle of action and action and more action and more action, and we don't know when to stop. So that's the danger for most of us. And so when do we withdraw from karma yoga in the long span of our spiritual sadhana? I think Amma would say that you don't have to decide yourself when to withdraw. When you have sufficient inner purity, nature and the universe will pull you out of it in one way or another. So it's not for us to say, I think I'm pure now, so I'm not going to do any more karma yoga. That itself is a sign that we need to do more karma yoga. The thought, I'm pure now. Some people say that. They say like, I'm really into self-knowledge, the path of knowledge, and now I'm done with karma yoga. You're like, okay, see how far that's going to get you, Because Amma never says that kind of thing. She says, when the time comes, it'll happen on its own. Look at Amma's life. She was working like a dog her whole childhood, taking care of her family, right? When did she stop doing those household chores? Anybody can remember what it was that made her stop doing all that? No, there's something happening in between. Between darshan and stopping the chores, and doing the household chores, there was another event that happened that stopped her from doing all the household chores. Huh? She got kicked out of the house by her family. Her mother and father threw her out of the house. How can you do the household chores when they kick you out? That's it. Fine. But it's not like Amma ran away from home. Right? She was ready to do it indefinitely. Because for her it was Krishna's work. She said, give me more work. You gave me your work. I want to do it remembering you. But she got kicked out. And she wasn't like, no, that's my household chores. No one else is going to do it. What did she do when she got kicked out? Just, okay, fine. I'm on the beach. I'm just going to sit here and meditate all day long. I don't need to eat. I'm just going to immerse myself in thoughts of Krishna and Devi. So for her, it was not a loss or a gain. It was just natural. So we will find those things happening to us in small ways also. We have to allow those things to happen. That's my experience. I might have told you how I used to be in the computer room my first couple of years of life in Amritapuri. Some of you might have heard that. So I was there, this is a long time ago when there was nobody in Amritapuri that knew how to do anything with computers. One day I was in deep silence and fasting and doing my austerity really intensely. And someone came and pulled me away and said, look, you gotta come to the computer room, the computer's not starting. And I had to break my, vow of just not working that day, to go into the computer room to fix the computer, and actually it wasn't even plugged in. So this is the level of computer know-how that existed in some quarters. So it didn't take much in those days to be a computer expert. So I was like the computer expert, and anything happened, I would go and I don't know what happened in those days. If I just touched the computers, they would work. But around 1996, something happened where, when I started touching the computers, they started breaking. Then everyone's like, get out of the computer room, get out of here, you don't have to come here anymore. So it was like, okay. And then my seva changed and, So it was, you don't have to decide yourself. It'll happen on its own. So if you pull yourself away from it, typically you create like a centrifugal force and you get whipped right back around into it. So let it happen naturally. That's my experience. So what does that purification we get from karma yoga enable us to do? We have to understand, because the reason why I'm saying this is because as you're doing your karma yoga and your quote-unquote selfless service, The not so selfless side of yourself is going to pop up and say, what are you doing this for anyhow? What are you getting anything out of this? I mean, you could be out earning money and you could make like $500 in the time that you're here vacuuming the floor in the ashram, Why are you doing this? And if you're like, I don't know why I'm doing this, then it won't take long for your mind to talk you into going out and getting a second job or something, right? So why? What? That purification, what is that? What's the benefit of that? How does it help us? Because if we're not convinced of that, then your karma yoga is going to be short-lived, you can be sure. Okay, Radha?
Maybe if you're in a more purified state, not going to be as seduced by your mind. So you can
Why? Why?
The mind is not real.
Right, but there's one logical step in between that. Purification and being able to see the mind, that...
Because then you're receiving, you're able to be more connected to truth.
Okay. Anybody want to add a twist on that? Just one more level of clarity there. Oh, I gave it away. Oops. Concentration. Okay, concentration, yeah?
I guess the way I would, I think about it is, I think most of us just react in life.
Right.
We don't really choose.
Right.
So in that place of understanding, then everything just becomes clear.
Yeah, that's the word my personal bias. Clarity is what I feel. Inner purity gives clarity of mind and perception. So that helps you. That's what Radha was saying, that it's a question of being able to perceive the delusions of the mind at that moment, right? How do you perceive something when it's, presumably you? It's a very subjective experience. It's like trying to see your nose, you really got to focus and be clear. So that mind, the delusions of the mind, can become more clear. And then when we stop being deluded by the mind, finally we're able to do some introspection, right? Instead of being a slave of the mind's the vagaries of the mind all day long, you can say, wait a second, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look within and ask myself a really important question. Like what? What are some important questions in life that are not to do with what the mind is thinking all day long?
Who am I?
Yeah, who am I? And what am I doing here? Why I took birth, okay, why did I take birth? Am I just blindly following the masses? Or do I have some inner compass of mind that I'm following that's guiding me to a higher purpose? So these questions, most people in the world never ask themselves. But a few people do. Right? And that inner clarity enables us to do that. And especially in the presence of a realized master, a Sadguru, like Amma, you can do that. Not only can you do that, but you get the answers. Imagine you do a lot of sadhana, you ask yourself that question, but you don't have the good fortune to be in the presence of a realized master like Amma. You could ask that question your whole life and never get the answer, perhaps. If you really ask it hard enough, sincerely enough, Amma says the master will manifest himself or herself to you. So maybe that's what happened to some of you in your lives. So this is really very essential verse teaching us some important angles on both the path of self-knowledge as well as the path of karma yoga. So, when you do that introspection, when you get the clarity, your mental clarity through the purification, to do some introspection, only then do we start to understand that our problems have their origin inside of ourselves. I think probably most of our lives until we met Amma, we always saw the problems as being outside, didn't we? Even now we still continue quite a bit, but at least there is some hope for us to see the source of the problem inside of us. Amma used to give a really, a nice talk about wanting everything to be right in life. I think she starts it off that way. We all want things to be right. We want to have the right boss, the right wife, the right house, the right job, the right salary, the right position in life. But we ourselves never try to become right. Never try to be right. It means correct yourself. So that process of self-inquiry helps us to perfect ourselves inside. And that is when you turn inside and you find your satisfaction inside, that's when you change from one who revels in the senses to Atmarati, which is the word he uses in this verse, one whose delight, who rejoices in the self. Whose delight is in the self, or you can see who rejoices in the self. Now, because we have that tendency our whole lives to look for happiness in the world, aren't we always looking for like the next level of contentment or happiness? Maybe not anymore, but it's still there on a subtle level. I mean, what do you call it? The capitalistic economy always plays on that, right? You've got the latest upgrade. Your phone or your this and your that is not good enough. You need the latest thing. Because there's a tendency, we're always looking for one level higher of contentment. Even Bill Gates, I think, is probably looking for a level higher of contentment. But why doesn't someone like Amma perceive her life in that way? Why doesn't Amma look for the next level of happiness? But what if you were to say, Amma, there's another level higher than that. Why not go for it?
She's the supreme consciousness.
Huh?
Is she at the highest level?
She is.
No one.
First of all, there's no one any left to pursue the happiness, a higher happiness. And second of all, if you already, like Jay Shri suggested, if you already feel infinite bliss, and someone comes and tells you, no, there's infinity squared, go for it. You're going to be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. There's no possible state higher than this. That's what they experience. In fact, it says that in, I think, Gita or the Upanishads, it says, there is no state higher than this. That is the experience of a realized being. They just know that intuitively. You don't have to tell them. Yeah, it's the same thing. But in that case, that's somebody else attributing that to Amma. And Amma can just say, you didn't have to tell me that, I already knew that, right? So if you get to that state, you'll know it. So there's no question of the next level. Even like Olympic athletes strive to break their own records, right? They want to go even faster. They're never satisfied. But for Amma, can you imagine you're being infinite, eternal, the sole existent being, the all-pervasive, unchanging reality. And then you're going to say, no, I'm going to go for something bigger. There's nothing left. So, that's why they never seek their happiness outside. When Amma was here in Chicago, I tried to tempt her, actually. Because somebody brought a echinacea flower to Amma in darshan, actually, and that was me through that person. I had sent that. I said, go bring this echinacea flower to Amma. I want to tell her about the echinacea field. And then so you can just be the pawn. So I forget who it was. Somebody brought the echinacea flower and I said, yes, Amma, it's a huge field of echinacea over there. And I was like, ... And then, when you leave the darshan hall, it's not very far away, And then she said, oh, how can I see all the things, Even in Amritapuri, I haven't seen all the plants. In Amritapuri, they even name all the trees and flowers and everything, and I haven't seen any of it, even in Amritapuri. ... So what she means is that she's not going to go on a tour of the Chicago ashram and see every flower and plant. That's for us that gives us joy to see that kind of thing, right? But yeah, I guess the point is that Amma doesn't need to see these things, right? Not only does she not need to see them to be joyful and contented, but it's already, everything is inside of her, right? If you know that the whole universe is inside of you, why do you have to go on a tour of yourself? It's not necessary for her. So, but we have this selfish desire to show her around.
did say put it on Facebook.
Yeah. But I showed her some photos that Beth sent me. Sent a number of us, I guess. I showed that to Amma during darshan, and again I used Gibran as my excuse. Gibran, you go for darshan, I'm going to show Amma the photo. And he's like, okay. We had it all strategized. And it worked, at least in this case. I showed her the photo and she says, oh, it's so beautiful. Put it on Facebook. I don't know if it went on Facebook or not.
I think it's fair to say Amma was quite pleased with the ashram.
Yes,
and,
she was pleased.
And really expressed her joy of being here.
Yeah, I mean, she's a contradiction in terms from day one, Amma herself, you know. She expresses joy, she expresses dissatisfaction with things, but there's no such thing as joy and dissatisfaction for her because she's always in bliss. Still, she does this kind of thing for us.
Maybe that wasn't the right choice.
No, but there's no other words to use.
Yeah.
There's no other words. And it's important that she do it because it's like a, signboard saying you're going in the right direction, If we weren't, she would have showed something else. So it was very reassuring. But as it says in this verse, tasya karyam na vidyate, which means there's nothing in this whole world that she needs to do. Right?
Nothing that she needs to do, but she did spell out a lot of work for us to do.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you guys need to do, so get to it. Right? Yeah, but the problem is that see, because Amma's not focused on the result, she can enjoy the actions. We're always, unfortunately, focused on the result, so that's why we struggle to enjoy the action itself. Amma enjoys the action constantly. She always, because she enjoys what she's doing, she can make everybody so happy. That's what you see in darshan. This person who's just sprinkling bliss all over people because she's not worried about the outcome of what she's doing. All our stress and tension and worry comes from that. Oh, what if it doesn't happen the right way? Yeah?
Yeah, it just seems that it's all about the future. If I was in the present moment, then nothing is needed. Like that's a way in which we can emulate or strive. If we can bring our sense of time down to the present moment, then so much is so much better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just because we don't have that compassion. That's the problem. We're so focused on ourselves and we don't have that compassionate feeling with other people that they're one with us. That's one of the biggest problems. It's not a small problem. That Advaita Bhava that she has, the feeling of non-duality, gives her this infinite compassion. So she's always in the present moment, consoling all of us.
In all fairness, it wasn't Amma's joy, but the universal joy expressed by so many people related to Amma about how much they enjoyed the experience.
Well, yeah, she's happy when we're happy. She wants us to evolve spiritually because she knows that's for our good. And this is a sign that we're all focusing on the ashram. It's good for us spiritually.
Right. As a family.
Yeah, exactly, her children. So the three adjectives that Krishna uses in this verse are very important for us to remember. One who is reveling in the self, one who is contented in the self, and one who is only contented in the self. These are three very important words, because they're often the opposite of us. And actually there's a, is it here or is it another verse I was going to talk about? Okay, next verse I was going to talk about that. So there's no dharma or adharma for a jnani. They have no worldly duties. And why don't they have any worldly duties? We're going to find out about that in the last verse, which we have to do quickly. Naiva tasya krite nartho na krite neha kaschana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschidartha vyapashrayah. Okay, who is... yes, Srinath, you read. Is it Srinath?
Neither has he any profit to gain in this life from the actions he has done, nor has any loss from the actions he has not done, nor is there any living creature on whom he needs to rely for any purpose.
So that's the definition of Amma, right? Nothing she needs to do, nothing she should avoid, and she doesn't need to depend on anybody. So all these people, who are around Amma, including me, who feel like I'm indispensable. If I weren't there, if I'm not there, then gosh, the whole universe around Amma is going to come to a grinding halt. Amma will just be like, I don't need any of you guys. How did the whole tour start? It was just Amma. She was the line, what do you call that? She was DLF, she was the, all these things. She was post-darshan seating, she was the usher, she was everything. She was the lead singer. Anyhow, so this verse really talks about the height of self-knowledge. So a realized being like Amma has discovered total freedom. Now, when we say freedom, we have to remember that Amma does depend on people in a physical sense, right? She has people. Now there's so many thousands of people that come that she uses. Gita, Bhavani, and Asha, the people that you might not know their names, but these are the people who are, pulling the people forward and pushing them down and making darshan go faster. Push, pull, and Amma likes to make jokes about the way they do it sometimes. But the reality is that if you want to hug 5,000 people in a short period of time, you need somebody to make the conveyor belt keep going, right? So physical dependence is not a disqualification for self-realization, right? That's clear. Being physically dependent on someone or something does not disqualify you from being a realized being. It's inner dependence that is a disqualification. Amma is internally completely independent, emotionally completely independent. She doesn't need or necessarily want anybody. If she quote-unquote wants someone, it's just because it's for that person's good. Like Amma might say, I remember Amma told this one boy, actually he was a little suicidal some long time ago. And he had this kind of maybe you could say it's sort of a chemical imbalance in the brain. So he was a little, had that problem. And he told me that at one time Amma said to him, Amma needs you. So when he said that when Amma said that to me, there was no way I could ever think about suicide ever again. Because Amma said, I need you. So I thought, well, if Amma needs me, then I got to stick around. But does Amma need him? No. But how else to talk somebody out of doing that, ultimate thing? So she did, it was such a wise thing she did, think about it. But really, she doesn't need anybody. And so accepting external limitations is part of freedom, right? Accepting the limitations of yourself and your surroundings is a sign of inner freedom. Does that make sense? Right? But we don't have to accept the emotional limitations. My first trip to Amritapuri was the other way around. I resisted all the external discipline, and I was internally very bound. I didn't have any internal freedom, and I resisted all this external freedom as well. So what Amma does is she accepts external limitations, because that's a sign of surrender and freedom. But internally, she's completely detached. So, yes, the extremes of action and inaction he's referring to here indirectly. So a jnani, or a knower of the self, or Amma, doesn't have any extremes of action or inaction. Amma, if there's nobody for darshan, she can be completely inactive all day long. She can just sit still and revel in herself. What does she have to lose or gain? And extreme Inaction is also another pitfall. That's another addiction. She doesn't have either one of those. She can enjoy both. Because, like we said a moment ago, she doesn't expect life to become better, either by inactivity or activity. There's nothing can be better than infinity. So if you already know that you are that, there's not like, oh, I gotta do more, so I'm gonna make my life better. The only motivation for Amma to do action is what?
For other people's happiness.
Yeah. It's called it comes up in the 4th chapter, Loka Sangraha, I think is the word it uses. Anyhow, it's for the upliftment of the world. Oh yes, and then in Shankaracharya's commentary on the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, he says something really beautiful. The only dharma of a knower of the self, the only responsibility or duty of a knower of the self is what? He says that they have one duty. It's a beautiful thing he says though. What would be the only duty of a knower of the self?
Others realize they can also.
Not necessarily, because sometimes they never do that. It's kind of a tricky answer. Huh?
Keep knowing the film.
Ah, see, this guy who brought this guy here? Remain a knower of the self. Right? So jnana nishta means remaining established in the self is the only duty of a self-realized being. It means if you're self-realized, you will always, by definition, you will always remain established in the self. So he says that's the only duty that they have. So when Amma visited Mahima in southern, what was her name? Mahima? In Kanyakumari, right? Wasn't that her name? And she was Digambari, she was naked, rolling around with the stray dogs on the beach in Kanyakumari. You know, she was fulfilling her duty as a knower of the self, right? She only has one duty, and that was to remain established in the self. She was doing that. But she wasn't doing much else. But she was still fulfilling her duty. So, doesn't mean that self-realized beings won't do other actions. Because even Krishna and Amma are always doing actions, right? For the sake of the world, like we said. And let's say we realize God or the self one day, most likely being disciples of Amma, we will also continue to do selfless actions just to set an example for other people. Amma says, if I don't do these things, my disciples will become lazy. So that's why she does all these things. So, the progression is, first we depend on the world, then we realize that the world is none other than God. Amma says the same thing. And we depend on God. And then you realize that God is none other than yourself. And you depend on your own self. This is the progression through karma yoga and path of knowledge. And we will find out more about the self-realized being next week. I think we're all here next week. Nothing special happening on Friday, no? Huh? That's Thursday. Friday in India is Thursday here. Just so you know, the moon is waxing maximum in Chicago on Thursday night. So that's why we celebrate it here on Thursday. And Thursday is the day of the Guru. Perfect, right? So, with those concluding words, should we do questions? Okay, very brief questions. I kind of consumed too much time with discussing, but we can have one or two quick questions before we meditate.
To be short, I just can't get out of my mind that comment about I need you.
Yeah.
And so you were talking about Amma not being a self the way we're self. She's the realized self.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible that when she says, I need you, she's not talking about Amma needs you, as Amma the personage, but that all of us are here because we're supposed to be here. We're supposed to be here, so we're needed here. Or we wouldn't be here. I just keep wanting to go further with that. I need you. It feels like
Yeah, you could take there could be different derivations of it. And whenever Amma says that word I, which she rarely ever says, but when she does say it, who knows which level she's talking about, you know, so yeah, she uses it every once in a while. She uses it in a worldly sense, and then she can't use it always in like the ultimate sense, because we don't understand what that is, you know. So when she said, I need you, at that time, the boy took it to mean like, Amma, this body in front of me needs this body here, so therefore I should not kill myself, you know. That's how he took it, which was the most important thing at that moment, was how he responds to that. But maybe as he matured, he understood it on a deeper level, you never know. I'll have to ask him. Okay, just another quick question, and then we'll conclude. Srinath has a question. Wait, the mic is coming.
Sure. One of the mantras in the Archana is she who fulfills all desires. So you're talking about tuning earlier, and say a sadhak, I'm a rookie, so I'm asking you because you've been around a lot longer. Say a sadhak says, okay, oh Lord, please let me be totally tuned to you in this lifetime, just over and over. Praise for purity of mind, like Amma suggests, praise to become Amma's instrument, like she recommends. Then, does it even matter? Like, can a sadhak try to assess, okay, am I tuned yet? Is there a test, or does it even matter? Does it not even matter to worry about that test? Like the guru will just reveal whether this one becomes tuned or not.
Okay. You will feel it. You feel when you're in tune, and you feel when you're out of tune. That's my experience. There's certain things that, I don't know, when you feel you're tuned with Amma, you just feel when you're with her. How else can you explain being in tune? It's like a tuning fork, you know, or if you're tone deaf, you won't be able to tell music, right? But in the spiritual sense, I would say there's no such thing as tone deafness. In the spirit, we all have that inner ability to tell whether we're in tune with something or not. It's not a physical thing like your eardrum being able to distinguish different frequencies. So spiritually, when we're connected with Amma, you feel that connection, that tuning when you're in her presence. And if your life has somehow disrupted that tuning, you'll feel it next time you're back. I felt that so painfully, you know, in those first few years of my relationship with Amma. Every time she would go away, the tuning would slowly dissipate, and then I would have 6 months of totally slaughtering my tuning with Amma, and then I would come back in her presence and I would cry like a baby, because I felt that lack of tuning so painfully. So that was not subtle in any way, but it becomes subtler and subtler, you know, little variances, you start to feel, wow, you know, if I had been more in tune with Amma, I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have done that. I would have had proper judgment. It's usually your actions that tell you, you know, things that you do that you would never have done if you were really thinking about Amma all the time, or said. So that shows us we need to strive for more tuning. Okay. So we will chant some mantras, because this is the official ending time of the class, or 5 minutes after that, in fact. And those whose schedules don't allow can feel free to go, and don't feel bashful about that. And then those whose schedules permit can remain, and we'll meditate for a few minutes. Om Satoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So, those who can remain, please try to sit with your spine and neck straight, but in a relaxed posture. Take a few long, deep breaths. And with each inhalation and exhalation, feel your body and mind relaxing further and further. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence here with us in this room, pervading all around you and within you. Now focus on the rhythm of your breathing process. Breathe with a deep feeling. Feel the breath so tangibly, almost as though you could grasp it. And be fully conscious of each and every breath. as the rhythm of your breathing slows down and becomes deeper and deeper, so too the mind slows down and goes deeper and deeper within. The deeper the mind dives, the more the thoughts dissolve. Until you reach a place, a profound stillness at the core of your being. When our mind is immersed in the tranquility of that space, contentment and joy well up spontaneously from within us. When we experience peace with no effort, we get a glimpse of the meaning of Amma's words, Krishna's words. Allow yourself to abide in that space for some more time. us open our hearts and pray with the innocence and love of a small child. Let us pray to Amma for her guidance and grace. O my beloved mother, O my most precious Amma, please help this child feel you within me all the time. It's when I feel you, Amma, that my mind becomes peaceful. It's when I feel you that contentment comes naturally. Then there's no need to seek joy outside. My mind spontaneously becomes calm, and the restlessness of seeking joy in the outside world disappears. If I stumble and forget you, Amma, you please take my hand and bring me back. I may fail, but don't abandon this child, Amma. Please bring me back and keep me close to you. Never leave me. Don't let me forget you, Amma. You're my only refuge. Now let us conclude with one final prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnāt Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, slowly open your eyes. Vishvaya, and see you next week.